Hello. Memorizing the Bible. Well, how's it going for you? I hope you're doing well. Today we're going to try to memorize the book of Deuteronomy. But first, let's just do a little bit of review. Remember, there are 4 major sections in the Old Testament. It's arranged for the most part topically. So you have law, history, poetry, and then prophecy. And the New Testament has 4 divisions. It's the Gospels, history, letters, and prophecy. And we're in the Old Testament right now. We are in the books of the law. And Deuteronomy ends those 5 books that Moses wrote, and we'll be looking at it. We'll start to a little review, though. If you had to describe the book of Genesis in just one word, what word would you use? Well, the word I use is beginning. I'm trying to remember that it's the beginning of everything, the beginning of creation, the beginning of sin, the beginning of our languages, the beginning of a covenant relationship with the Hebrew people. And I also use the word, or the phrase I should say, I also think about a 4x4. There are 4 main events and 4 main characters. The 4 main events are creation, the fall, the flood, and we have the creation, the fall, the flood, and the covenant. I'll get it right. And then there's 4 main personalities. You have Abraham. Abraham, we'll start off with Adam, and Noah, and then Abraham, and then Joseph. Well, I have it memorized. I might get a little confused now and then. But anyway, that's what the book of Genesis is about. If you had to describe the book of Exodus in one word, what would you use to describe it? Well, the word that I use is the word exit. It sounds like Exodus, doesn't it? An exit. The exit from Egypt. It starts with a story of Moses and how Moses' first 40 years went, the second 40 years, the third 40 years, and the exit from Egypt, the receiving the law on Mount Sinai. And then we've looked at the book of Leviticus. Leviticus, it has right here in the beginning, Levi. All priests were Levites. Not all Levites were priests, but all priests were Levites. And so I use that word priest. What is of interest to priests? Well, they are interested in worship and how to sacrifice and what should be sacrificed. They're interested in applying the law to people. So that's what we find in Leviticus. We find the law being given. We find the feast of Israel, the feast that they will celebrate each year. And we find out how they're to sacrifice. And then Numbers, it's wanderers. Numbers, wanderers, grumblers, rumblers. That's Numbers. Numbers to take a census, and then they took a census and they began wandering in the wilderness because they have disobeyed God. They will not take the land of Canaan as he told them to. And so they begin to grumble. They complain and whine about things. So it's Numbers, wanderers, grumblers, and then they begin to deal with some of the nations in the wilderness. And so they are rumblers. And so today we're going to look at the book of Deuteronomy. Now, Deuteronomy is a repeating of the law. In fact, Deuteronomy means the second law. And that's a way to remember what Deuteronomy is about. Sometimes I think about 3 when I'm thinking about Deuteronomy because it seems to be divided up into 3 different sections. The first section of Deuteronomy is a remembrance. Remember the failures of the previous generation. And so we have come 40 years since the Exodus. And because of their disobedience, we learn in Numbers that they're going to wander for 40 years until that generation dies out. Now you have a new generation that is about to go into the land of Canaan. And he wants them to remember the failures of your previous generation. Remember the failures of your parents and how they rebelled against God. And so choose wisely. And so the first few chapters are about that remembrance. And then the second division of the book of Deuteronomy is a repeat of the law. Now, I want you to notice something as we talk about Deuteronomy that I think is really, really important. The reason for all these laws, they are not arbitrary. The reason for God giving us laws is so that our lives might go better. You know, when you get a car, you get a manual from the manufacturer. And he says, here's what we recommend you do. Here's what we recommend that you use these principles. You follow these rules when you look at this car. And the reason is not to put pressure on you, to be mean to you, but to allow that car to have as many miles as possible. And that's why God has given them these laws, so that life will go well for them. Listen to some of these things, like in Deuteronomy, the 4th chapter, and beginning in verse 39. He says, "Know therefore today, and take it to heart, that the Lord, He is God in heaven above and on the earth below. There is no other. So you shall keep His statutes and His commandments, which I am giving you today, that it may go well with you and with your children after you, and that you may live long on the land which the Lord your God is giving you for all time." I'm writing these things so that things will go well with you. This is the owner's manual's recommendations on how to live your life. Follow these rules. Take them to heart. There's a lot about heart in the Old Testament. We think about it as sometimes as rote obedience. Just here's what it says. We take it and put it in our mind and we do it. But it's all about our heart. The New Testament is all about our heart. People disobey because their heart is not right with God. And so he starts off here, take this to heart because there's a God in heaven above and on earth below. Somebody says, where does the Bible get its authority? Well, it gets it from God. God is the writer of Scripture, and that's where it gets its authority. And over, we get this message. Hear. The word hear is found 50 times in this book. And then do, keep, observe, 177 times. Do these things. Chapter 5, verse 29. Oh, that they had such a great heart in them, that they would fear me and keep all my commandments always, that it may be well with them and with their sons forever. You see God's reason? I want things to work out for you. In chapter 10, verses 12 and 13. "And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God require from you? But to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all His ways, and love Him, and to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to keep the Lord's commandments and His statutes, which I'm commanding you today, for your good." It's for our good. These laws aren't arbitrary. They aren't just things that just God thought, well, maybe this will be a good idea. This will trip them up. They're not arbitrary. They're laws that were put in place so that people could live good lives. I think about the law of gravity. The law of gravity doesn't change just because you don't like it. You step off the edge of a building and the law of gravity is going to break you. It's going to hurt you. It's a good thing you know about the law of gravity so that you can fear it and respect it. Because knowing that law will keep you safe. And that's what it is with the laws of the Old Testament. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean it's going to go away. It is going to break you if you disobey them. Because these are principles of how to live good lives. In the context here, it's how to live a life that is different than the neighboring countries that they're living in. It's different. It's dealing with where they live and the neighbors they live around. And so some of the laws might sound a little different and strange to us, but it's because of where they live and who they live with. And so remember this, and the reason for God writing these things is for our good. And then there's the repeat. In chapter 5, for instance, you get to hear the 10 Commandments again. So if you want to know where to find the 10 Commandments in the Bible, it's in Exodus, the 20th chapter, and Deuteronomy, the 5th chapter. Deuteronomy, the 6th chapter, is really important. It's what we call the Shema. from Hear, O Israel, in verse 4. I want to begin in verse 1. He says, Now this is the commandment, the statutes and the judgments, which the Lord your God has commanded me to teach you, that you ought to do them in the land where you are going over to possess it, so that you and your son and your grandson might fear the Lord your God, to keep his statutes and his commandments, which I command you all the days of your life, and that your days may be prolonged. O Israel, you should listen and be careful to do it, that it may be well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, just as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And these words which I'm commanding you today shall be on your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign in your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead, and you shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. You should absorb these laws and live these laws so that it will go well with you. When Jesus was asked, what's the foremost of all commandments? What's the greatest of all commandments? He quoted from Deuteronomy chapter 6. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. So the laws are very important. And then from chapter 5 through chapter 26, the law is revisited. You have the retelling of the law. From about chapters 14 through 26, you're going to find yourself, thinking, maybe, haven't I just read this? It's like driving through Nebraska. You ever driven through Nebraska and you, after a while, you think, haven't I already seen this? And so you're driving through the book of Deuteronomy, you think, well, haven't I already read this? Yeah, well, you have. You read it in Exodus and Leviticus and some in Numbers. And so it's a repetition. And the reason for that repetition is because we have a new generation who needs to hear it all over, have it fresh in their mind as they go into the land of Canaan. And then the third part of Deuteronomy is what's required of them. They get to choose. We all get to choose. We all have a choice. We get to choose a blessing or a curse in our life. We have free will. This is the story of the Bible. Adam and Eve had a free will. They had a choice. They could choose what they wanted. And we continue to have choice. We continue to be able to choose. And you could choose either to have your life blessed or your life cursed. You break these laws, and you're going to find you're living a pretty miserable life. You're having some real issues. You're feeling like a real victim. You're going through some real struggles. But you follow these rules, and you'll find out that your life is going pretty good. You're going to be pretty blessed. And so here's what he says in chapter 30, beginning in verse 11. For this commandment, which I command you today, is not too difficult for you, and it's not out of your reach. It's not in heaven that you should say, who will go up to heaven and get it for us, and make us hear it that we may observe it? Nor is it be on the sea that you should say, who will cross the sea for us to get it for us and make us hear it that we may observe it? But the word is very near you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may observe it. See, I have set before you today life and prosperity, death and adversity. There's the choice. You can have life and prosperity or death and adversity. In that I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commandments and his statutes and his judgments, that you may live and multiply, and that the Lord your God may bless you in the land where you are entering to possess it. But if your heart turns away and you will not obey, but are drawn away and worship other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall surely perish. You shall not prolong your days in the land where you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, the blessing and the curse. So choose life in order that you may live, you and your descendants, by loving the Lord your God, by obeying his voice, and by holding fast to him. For this is your life, and the length of your days, that you may live in the land which the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, to give them. This is your life. You don't get another one. This is not a dress rehearsal for something else. This is your life. So choose wisely. Pay attention. Choose life. It reminds me of what we'll read when we get to Joshua. And Joshua says, choose you this day who you will serve. Whether you'll serve the gods that your fathers served beyond the river, or you serve the gods of the Amorites in whose land you now live. But as for me and my household, we are going to serve the Lord. And that's what Moses is trying to encourage them to do, is to obey God with all their heart. Have good hearts. Love God. Respect him. Fear him. And now we're going to end the book of Deuteronomy. In chapter 31, Joshua is going to be commissioned. He will take the lead of the people. It has been Moses up until this time. Moses is now 120 years old. He's not going to enter the promised land because of his sin. And we're going to see the funeral of Moses in chapter 34. Deuteronomy. If you had to describe the book of Deuteronomy in just one word, well, it's law. It's the second time he tells the law. It's the second law. It's divided into three parts. It's the reminiscing the law. It's the law itself. And then at the end, it's what's required of you. If I do 3 R's, remember, the reason, the repeat, and the requirement. However helps you remember what this book is about. For me, it just helps you remember that this is the second law, the second time it's told. And so we have the 10 Commandments again. After we have it in Exodus, we have it again. We have many of the same laws we're reading over and over because it's a new generation. Remember always when you're reading the Bible to remember the context you're reading. Now, this book, it says things will go well with you if you remember these things. Jesus knew the book of Deuteronomy very well, and he was able to quote it. We hear him quote Deuteronomy when the devil comes and tempts him out in the wilderness. And Jesus responds with Scripture. He's quoting Deuteronomy to them, to Satan, to resist the temptation. Also in the book of Deuteronomy, we're going to learn later on that it's pointing to Jesus. We'll read of Deuteronomy of a prophet to come. And this prophet we're going to see is Jesus. We're going to read of a king who's going to come. And this king we'll know is Jesus. And so all these things are all going to come up in the book of Deuteronomy. So I hope it helps you memorize what Deuteronomy is about. I hope you have a great week. May God bless you all.